In New Mexico, as in most states, as long as one person in a conversation knows it's being recorded, it's legal. It's a law that has helped many a journalist now pull back the curtain of secrecy that can surround government because people don't want to say anything. But as we saw with Keith Gardner's comments in Roswell, I'll remember that over the summer, some public officials are not too keen on being recorded. Senator Bill O'Neill has introduced a bill to require both parties to consent, operative word there, consent, to recording. Gwyneth, your organization opposes the bill, and full disclosure, our producer Matt Grubbs is on the board of the Society of Professional Journalists, which has also taken a stance against the measure. So let me ask you, from your perspective, your organization's perspective, what's the big deal?
Well, the big deal is that most people don't go around recording each other. This is not something normal people do every day.
Right.
But reporters do it every single day. They record conversations on the phone. They stick microphones in people's faces in coming out of a committee meeting. It is something that reporters do to make sure they get the quote right, they get the numbers right, that their stories are accurate, and they can go back and check their own work, and they can prove that it was right. It's a tool that journalists use that would be severely infringed by a bill like this. And, you know, Senator O'Neill had the best of intentions. And when I talked to him about this, he had not even thought of the way that it would affect the media.
Interesting.
But it would definitely have a chilling effect on the way reporters work. The other thing is, you know, I've spoken to some advocates for victims of domestic violence. And this is a huge group of people who use this to record evidence of wrongdoing that has been done to them that sometimes people just don't believe. They don't believe the things that have been said to them, the threatening phone calls, the harassing conversations, you know. So it is important to small groups of people. So the bill is overreaching. It tries to solve one problem, but creates a whole bunch of others.
I didn't realize that about domestic violence.
The
That's
other one,
interesting.
the other one that I didn't mention is, you know, it could impact bystanders recording police activity, for example. And these are all things that we want to protect. We want to protect the ability of the public and the media to hold those in power accountable.
Sure. Let me ask our reporter here at the table an interesting question Gwyneth just kind of prompted. If both people know they're being recorded, or the interviewee knows they're being recorded, how does that change the interview in your perspective? Negatively, positively? What happens there?
When I heard about this bill, and Bill O'Neill's a nice guy,
sure,
but this is a horrible bill, and especially for journalists like me, because I bring my little flip camera, record stuff all the time, strictly so, because I'm dealing with controversial subjects when you're talking about political subjects.
Sure.
And if I have to rely on taking physical notes, then a politician who does not like the story I write can just say, he misquoted me. I don't have any way.
Or worse, sue you.
Right.
Exactly.
But if I've got a recording, I can say, no, Senator, I've got everything you said here. Now, if the senator may not like me, may not like my organization, he might say, well, no, I'm not going to I'm not going to agree to this. I'll to let you record me. I can just take the notes.
Sure.
And then you're back at square one.
Let me stay with you a quick sec. Over the phone, a lot of stuff sometimes gets handled over the phone. As a habit, do you tend to tell folks if you're recording or not, just out of habit, out of courtessy?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't normally, just because it's a pain to record stuff over the phone.
Yeah.
But if I do, I always tell them.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay. So as someone who has been interviewed a whole bunch in your political life, how does this strike you as knowing or not knowing you're being recorded by a reporter? Would that change your pace, so to speak, in an interview?
Hindsight would change my pace maybe more than knowing if I was recorded or not. But, you know, I would say this. I think it's a tempest in a teapot to some extent. I think there can be exceptions for this. You know, someone recording for a domestic violence purpose. I mean, I can see that. I'm confused on how I have to get written consent if I put a microphone in Gwyneth's face today. She knows she's being recorded. And I think we could craft the law that way. I think the intent, and I haven't talked to is it Senator O'Neill? Senator O'Neill. Right. You know, I think the intent is exactly what we saw this summer with Keith Gardner. You walk in to talk to someone, you don't think you're in an interview, you don't think you're doing, this is not a journalist, this is some guy that decides he's going to record your conversation. I have problems with that. I have problems with that.
Do, but the fact is it rarely happens.
Well, but when it does,
what Rob does every day could be negatively impacted by this law.
I don't think it could be, because I would say I would say, and I'm not a lawyer, I played one for a few years in the legislature, but I'm not a lawyer. I would say that you have consent when you put the recorder on the deal and you say, we're recording. You put the microphone in somebody's face.
Investigative reporters would be
but
impacted.
Don't do that.
But also, let's say I go to Senator Foley and I say, Senator Foley, I want to talk to you about Bill X, and I put out my recorder. You say, turn that recorder off. I'm not going to talk as long as you got the recorder on. Then I have to rely on my notes, and then you can come back and say, Rob misquoted me if the story comes back making you look bad.
That's exactly it.
But I think you would do that anyway. I think if you just said to us that if someone told you to turn the recorder off, you would rely on your notes. So I think we're not trying to get at the reporter who says, let me record you. We're trying to get after that person I think they're trying to get after that person that does the recordings of, people in the bathroom, people in their bedroom, that it's being done by the neighbor to the neighbor. Somebody and we have a perfect example with Keith Gardner.
There are laws that would prevent that.
Like what? What prevents me from putting a recording device outside somebody's window?
There is already a law saying you cannot put a recording device in a bathroom.
Right, but I can still record from outside the bathroom, outside your home. I can still record what you're doing in your home without ever telling you. I can call you and I can record that without letting you know what I'm recording.
There are a lot of hypothetical things that people could do. The fact of the matter is they don't most of the time.
But they just did it.
Let me get Sophie in here, Dan. Hang on, I'm going to read you something, Sophie, from the Rio Grande chapter of Society of Professional Journalists who were opposed to this bill.
Shocker.
This is both an open government and a journalistic issue. Changes to the current law will diminish the autonomy of and protections afforded to reporters in New Mexico. Our state already lacks a shield law. As journalists, we cannot and should not allow this bill to pass. This shield law business has been kicking around for a few years as well. Is there a happy medium here underneath Mr. O'Neill's bill? Should we just talk about the shield law and forget this one side?
I think that the shield law is still an interesting and I think useful option and something that we should be taking another look at. I happen to agree, though, with two or three of the other people around the table, though, that this bill does not really get us where we want to go. At the heart, we have this issue.
Meaning it doesn't prevent anything, as Dan's bringing up, or is it?
No, I think it prevents things that we actually, as a society, want to have happen. We want, and I'm glad that Gwyneth brought up the issue of domestic violence. That was something that I wanted to talk about as well. We want people who are the victims of harassment, who are the victims of situations like that, to be able to demonstrate to the police so that search warrants can be gotten, so that they can be protected. We want that. We want a free press. We have to balance that, though, against our individual sense of what privacy should be and what privacy we should have. And often the courts will look at what is the reasonable expectation of privacy in a particular circumstance. We expect to be private in our bathrooms. We don't expect to be private in the rotunda. We expect to be private in certain personal conversations. I think that situation with Keith Gardner being recorded in what he thought was a personal conversation really upset a lot of people because they had the sense that this should be private. Our sense of privacy is changing. This bill, I think, takes us back a bit in terms of developing a better understanding of what is private and what is not.
And even if you wrote the bill to say, all right, we're going to protect a private-to-private conversation, I don't know if it would affect the Keith Gardner situation because he's a public figure. I mean, I don't like what the guy who perpetrated the recording did to Keith Gardner, but since he's a public official, I don't know how you craft a law to take care of that.
And as Dan said, it probably is a tempest in a teapot because it's probably not going to pass.
Well, the committee hearing will be interesting. All these things will come to light. It'll be interesting. Now we're on the clock now with a firm and focused 60 seconds, sort of firm, sort of focused, to get through each topic we choose. Let's get started with a topic we just heard about, the spaceport. A liability protection bill passed the Senate unanimously and quite quickly, as a matter of fact. And Virgin Galactic is paying its first rent bill this month, but they're doing it under protest until the building is up to snuff. Rob, is Virgin, you've been covering this, are they asking too much here, or is this reasonable at our what do you think?
This is a problem that New Mexico has, and New Mexico is always going to have, because we are like a city that's got a pro football team with an owner who's always going to threaten to move unless you build them a new stadium.
What a great analogy.
We've got a spaceport.
Like Miami.
We've got a spaceport that we've already sunk $209 million into. I interviewed one of the Virgin executives this week, and I said, If a state comes along and gives you a better deal, are you going to listen to it? He's like, of course we are. We're business people.
There you go.
That's the problem we're in.
Sophie, what do you think?
I think that you've just put that beautifully. We will always have to worry about that. And at some point, we're going to have to say, yeah, Virgin, I guess we kind of agree with what you say in terms of this lease deal, or we totally don't agree, and bye.
Plus they're writing a check.
Or something in between.
Yeah. Exactly.
But this is not something that's just going to go away.
Sure, Daniel.
That's exactly what I warned of when I wasn't for it when we did it. I mean, this is, we had 8 other states telling us that they're doing it at the same time. We've discussed this ad nauseum on the show. I think that we've given way too much power to those guys, because if they pull out, we could have a big problem.
Very few clawbacks. $2 million at the most.
Which is not a lot out of 209.
The other state can say, hey, Virgin, come over to Arizona. We'll give you $2 million.
That's right. We get a check from Richard Branson with a little sad face on it. They move on, right? It's terrible.
That's right.
We talked about graduation rates last week at this table. This week, the question is whether higher graduation rates mean Hannah Skandera deserves a confirmation hearing. Mr. Foley, she has been waiting for this. The governor has been waiting for this.
Yeah, I've said this many times. I said this during Governor Richardson's deal. This is absolutely foolish not to appoint her, to confirm her. Elections have consequences. There's a qualification for her to have the job. Give the governor the people she wants. Hold her accountable for that. This political stuff, I think at the federal level as well, when Republicans do it, is wrong. Elections have consequences. If it says you got to be this person, if you can check those 3 boxes, they should get that person.
There you go. What do you think?
My buddy Dan and I agree. The public deserves to see a discussion on this woman who's been doing the job already.
That's the other thing.
I mean,
we're not going to confirm or just do the job.
She hasn't been home waiting. You're right.
My point is, though, that the public deserves to see the discussion of it.
Good point, Sophie.
Oh, I think we're well past the point where they need to have this conversation, have the vote one way or another.
What happens if we don't? Does it look bad for somebody if we don't have it this cycle?
I don't know that it looks bad for somebody, but it leaves that one position, that one department really in limbo.
It looks bad for the legislators.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly. I'm going to hold you there, Rob. My fault. A group of lawmakers wants voters to give the nod to constitutional amendments that would make university regents more accountable to the public and take some appointing power away from the governor. Is this a good idea? What do you think?
It's a little bit out of my purview, but if choosing to elect some of these regents means that people pay a little bit more attention to who they are, and if it means that we get some public debate.
What do you think about faculty representation?
Well, as a faculty member, I mean, but I don't know what I have to do with UNM. I'd be a terrible regent. If it increases public awareness and discussion, it's probably a good thing.
Because we get a great turnout for the CNM election, right?
I know.
Or the PRC, for that matter.
Right. Or city council.
I actually think the inclusion of the faculty member is, for me, is the most interesting part of it. I realize that the election part is interesting. It would be, but I question how much voters would pay attention. I think the inclusion of the faculty member it's past due. The long-standing problems that have occurred between faculty and the regents, I think, demand that there be faculty.
We have a student on there.
On a practical note, I think in theory it sounds okay, but in practicality, how many voters are going to know, I'm going to vote for that far down on the ballot?
It's like voting for judges.
This region sounds better than this potential
What's
region.
next? What's next? We're going to have elections for ambassadors. I mean, at the federal level. I mean, it is a plum appointment. It is the way it is. It's always worked that way, and I still think overall we've done a pretty good job with our regents in New Mexico.
There you go. Now, new difficult subject, the Griego shootings. We're taking only a small part of it on. The fact that the 15-year-old Nehemiah Griego allegedly refused to have a lawyer or an adult present during an alleged confession. Now, Sophie, it's interesting. A 15-year-old who had just gone through this, your Miranda rights may sound like Pig Latin. I mean, the whole thing sounds messy.
It's something that was made a joke of on the 21 Jump Street movie. Do you know what I mean?
That's right.
Like when kids see the Miranda warning, most of the time, what they see is as a person who says, no, 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 I'll talk.
That's right.
That's the representation of the warning that they see. I happen to believe that 15 really is too young. I know that we can try these kids as if they were adults, but I still think it's too young for a kid to be asked to represent themselves in that situation.
Is this going to be a problem, Rob, in court for somebody? It seems to me, I just...
Yeah, I would think that if you're a defense attorney, you're going to come in and say, this stuff has to be ditched. My only concern as a taxpayer, as a citizen of New Mexico, after this horrible thing, is I want to at least see justice done. And justice is supposed to be blind.
That's right.
And the kid deserves a fair trial, but the victims deserve to get the truth.
Fair enough. Absolutely.
You know, this is, you know, it's not only an age issue for me. I think it's also a matter of the crime that was committed. I mean, when you pull someone in a room and start trying to be rational with someone who clearly committed a crime that wasn't rational, how do you expect him? How do you expect this 15-year-old to be rational when you're talking to him when just a few hours earlier he's alleged to have killed his family? But the most important thing is my heart goes out to this family. There's survivors to this. This thing is really, you know, Senator Griego, former state senator. You know, his family's in my heart and prayers, and this is just a horrible thing for anybody.
Absolutely, as well as everyone here at New Mexico in Focus for the family for sure. Now, last subject, 2 gun bills were sidelined at the Roundhouse this week. From vastly different sides of the issue, Representative Miguel Garcia's bill to require background checks for private gun sales stalled at committee. And Representative Nora Espinosa's bill, the infamous one to ban enforcement of federal gun laws, was tabled. There's a difference there. Are we going to see any changes, Gwyneth, in the state gun law? And I say this under the idea that we just lost a former reporter from New Mexico who was a victim of the Arizona shooting, and it breaks my heart. One of the young women in the inauguration parade in Chicago was recently a victim of gun violence, speaking of 15-year-old. Yeah. So what's your thought on the gun bills here?
You know, I think that it's unfortunate that everyone agrees that we have a problem here, but it is so deeply politicized that I'm afraid that nothing's going to get done at all, because even though everyone agrees on what the problem is, I don't see a future for agreeing on what the solutions are.
Sophie?
Last week I said that I thought that the problem was, to a certain extent, the bravery of our legislature. And our legislators, there are some legislators who have really put it out there, who've really tried to move the conversation forward on gun control and background checks. There are others who clearly are not moving in the same direction. I think that we need to have a conversation now as a community, and certainly as we come out of the 60-day session, about what we as a community do within our own families, within our own neighborhoods.
Exactly.
That was not a call for vigilantism. I feel like
no,
I need
it was
to
not.
say
I didn't
that.
hear it all.
No.
Rob and Gwyneth, good to see you guys. Glad
you.
you're here. And we're out of time for this week. Thank you all. We're covering the legislature from Santa Fe, as well as having our weekly conversation here. Click over to NewMexicoInFocus.org for interviews and analysis all week long. And find us on Twitter for up-to-the-minute developments. Thanks for joining us. I'm Gene Grant. We'll see you next week in Focus.